Copenhagen is kind of pretty close to my heart. I've been here quite a few times in the past, actually, long before Jenkins became Jenkins, before it was, before it had another name. So, well, nowadays I think most people actually don't even realize that. So that's kind of good for me. But anyway, so. As you know, a lot is going on in this industry, right? A lot of companies is, I think, waking up to the fact that the software is becoming more and more critical part of their business. So we see, especially in the US, we see all sorts of interesting companies popping up, built primarily around this technology as a differentiator. And then they use that power to disrupt the existing market that's been around for quite some time. And then in part because of these things, I think all the tides are rising generally around the space of continuously DevOps and so on. So Jenkins is naturally at the front and center of that effort, right? So after this project started 2004, that was when the first commit went in, and then became somewhat popular around 2007 and so on. But so it's been going on for more than a decade, but the usage of Jenkins still continues to grow. So, one of the metrics that we use is the amount of automation that happens on Jenkins. And then we're still kind of growing at a very astonishing pace year over year. But if you look at, the newer parts of Jenkins, because, part of the challenges of this software being around for so long is people don't recognize that the Jenkins is in 2018 is a little bit different from what you're used to. Right? And then that's what I saw the lineup, the speaker in this show. We're going to be talking about all sorts of interesting things going on in the Jenkins project lately. And then now, when I look at what the users are reacting to those newer parts of Jenkins, I was very happy to see that there's a tremendous uptick in those more modern parts of Jenkins. So the pipeline, for example, is an effort that we've been doing for, I think at this point, maybe 3-4 years. It is probably one of the first transformational project that we took on in the Jenkins since the original key designs like Freestyle project. And that's really going up at the, basically, I mean, these numbers don't really mean anything at this point, but you see there's a tremendous uptick. So users are also recognizing, by and large, that the Jenkins is different from what you're used to, right? So I hope that's kind of my main point that I wanted to talk today is that there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the Jenkins project that you should be aware of. Now, another part of this challenge, so what made this possible, this kind of growth in the newer parts of Jenkins is our outreach effort, right? That's why I kind of enjoy coming to visiting different parts of the world, giving talks like this, but we've been doing it in a lot more organized way. So I think this, about 2 years ago, we started this effort in the community we call Jenkins area meetups. So this is a way for the local communities to get together. I know some of you here are organizers of these efforts in various different parts of the world, and I really appreciate that. And then so there, people have opportunity to get together with like-minded people, compare their notes, get to know new things that's going on in Jenkins and the broader industry. And then it's been going steadily up to the point of us connecting 24,000 members in the world. So, as I mentioned earlier, and I think as you individually know, because you are in the forefront of this effort, the way I think we are developing software is shifting rapidly and evolving. And then that's in part, so in Jenkins, in order to keep up with that evolution of the software development, we also needed to keep evolving, right? And then the bar, I think, is getting higher. Because early on, when I started this thing, the continuous integration is basically just some things that the people who are really, really passionate about this is going to do on the side. So, there was purely just a geek-to-geek conversation. But now, as this practice spreads across the industry and become more mainstream, we need to have, there's a higher bar for example, the ease of use, or the speed of delivery, or the lower maintenance overhead, or the scalability of the thing. So, after 10 years of doing Jenkins, we still need to keep working on this thing, which I kind of find surprising, right? This is turning into my like a lifelong project for me. So this transformation that we have to do to Jenkins, and that's exactly what we've been working on. And that's why I think there are so many interesting projects happening in Jenkins in 2018, is because of this rising bar. We realize that there is like a new set of projects that we can and should take on. And then, so I would say, in fact, 2018 is probably the year of the single most innovation happening in the community, right? Not only we are working on one project, but we are working on what I call the 5 superpowers. Those are 5 projects that are driven by a different group of people, but designed to work together to push Jenkins into kind of brand new territory. And then, as a CTO of CloudBees, I'm also very happy that our CloudBees people, are involved in many of these efforts, right? And then many of them are here today as well. So, because again, when I started this project, it was a kind of side open source project. And then it was great that we were able to collectively build this huge community of contributors that spans around the world. But at the same time, I think there are certain projects that requires bigger bandwidth. The challenges of this distributed community of individual contributors is that it's difficult for us to get together and join hands to solve a big problem, right? So, since then, we built CloudBees. It's a commercial entity that's providing, we are the biggest Jenkins backer. And then through that effort, we are able to put a lot more engineering effort and marketing and so on in and around Jenkins. And then that's, to me, is showing up as these 5 projects. So anyway, so we do, we have people, so I'm the CTO of the company, obviously, and then we do various commercial activities in and around Jenkins. And then what I found is that's allowing larger organizations to take on this journey. Like we, the engineering people, know that these things are necessary, the right thing to do, but for the larger organization to do these things, they need more help. So that's the kind that we provide, things that the CloudBees provide. And so I really feel like that positively contributed to the Jenkins ecosystem as a whole. And then as a little thank you gift, we brought a whole bunch of T-shirts, and then, in fact, more than I thought we were going to have. So I'm not going to bring this back to San Francisco, so make sure to stop by and then get your T-shirts and the stickers, right? And then you'll be doing me a huge favor. So I talked about these 5 superpowers, right? So those are individually very interesting efforts, but at the same time, they're also designed to work together. So some of these things. And then today, in particular, I wanted to talk about how some of these projects fit together to collectively move Jenkins into the direction of the more stateless Jenkins, right? Because those of you who run Jenkins here, you would know that it's kind of designed around certain notion, like a file system as a data store and a single process master and so on. But in 21st century, that's kind of not how people do things. So the sweet spot of things are moving. And we've been recognizing that for a long time. And then so, some of these projects kind of collectively work together in order to hit these key challenges, that is the turning stateless, turning Jenkins into stateless. So if you look at this, like a statelessness from different ways, like why do we care about that, right? I think it's good to recap why we care about that. So I think one of the key, the superpower that we, the Jenkins community, is trying to give you, the users, is the ability to apply the same change control practice to the Jenkins configuration itself, right? When I say Jenkins configuration, I don't just mean the settings, but basically the whole way of running Jenkins. And then what do I mean by that? It's the ability to make a change as a Git commit and then be able to do the code review with your peers and then merge that to the master branch to get that deployed, perhaps through different environments. And then if you discover that there's any trouble, you'll be able to roll it back, right? You do this thing for the application you're building. you should be able to do the same with your infrastructure or the tools that you use. And I think this is like a growing, this kind of mindset has been growing over the past decade or so, I think. And now it's firmly established as a kind of like a necessary engineering hygiene, I'd say. Another sort of the reason we care about this kind of thing is to prevent Jenkins from becoming a snowflake. Like, what if you can make a change to any part of Jenkins with the confidence, because you know how every single configuration has been done by who, why, and when, so that you don't have this feeling of, oh, like this thing, I don't understand why it's done this way, but I'm really afraid of changing it and breaking stuff, so I'm just going to leave it like that. Too many people, I think, are feeling like that too often, and we need to fix that. The upgrade, I think, is a special kind of configuration change that often tends to be painful, right? So what if you can safely upgrade Jenkins to a newer version without fearing about this failed upgrade, right? Because you have this instant ability to roll back to previously same state. And then from the project developer's perspective, Jenkins, we struggle when users do not upgrade, right? Because we've been working on all these awesome projects, and it turns out that people are not using it because they are still running the Jenkins like a 2.5 or 2.100 or whatever, right? So for us, the ability to deliver the latest and greatest Jenkins is kind of important, and so we want to make it easier for you to consume those. Or how about, what if you can, provision the same Jenkins instance at a large scale, because you work for big organizations, amount of automation that you have to process keeps expanding. More and more teams are coming on board to your infrastructure. How do you manage this large infrastructure of fleet of Jenkins, right? Well, it'd be mighty convenient if you can have like a one same set of configurations and like a cookie cutter those things. And those are, again, the ability that the stateless Jenkins would give you. And then the last one is probably this disaster recovery kind of situation, where what if you can lose the entire way your Jenkins is deployed, but it's captured in this as a code, and then so you'll be able to restore them quite easily and handily, so you don't have to worry about this keeping the server up and running all the time or anything like that. So this is actually like the one roadmap slide that I put, I think at this point, four years ago or so, around the time we did the Jenkins 2. So, this making Jenkins stateless is a kind of a big project that spans across many different domains. So back then we made this I guess I made this code that, these are this independent effort that's been happening inside the Jenkins community around the time 1.x. And it's still okay, we have to take on, we take on this pipeline as code. But now we have to do, beyond that, we have to do more. And this is the kind of things that we have, started and then accomplished to a certain extent since then. So we've been, when we set our eyes on, we, the Jenkins community, when we set eyes on certain things, we have ways of making it happen. And I'm very proud of that. So anyway, so on that, since I mentioned that there are a lot of different aspects to the statelessness to the Jenkins, I kind of wanted to give a general cover story. And I know that for many of these topics, later today, different people will be speaking in a lot more details about these projects, right? So the first of the superpower that kind of helps Jenkins move to the stateless world is the pipeline. So the pipeline, I'm sure you are probably ahead of the curve Jenkins users here, so I hope you're already using all of those. The pipelines kind of became a bread and butter. That's where all the automation workload would run, right? So it's incredibly important for us to keep making sure that it serves the need. So, from the technology perspective, we have kind of like a two-headed approach to the pipeline. The one is, we keep making more iterative improvements, so like a one bug fix at a time and one pull request at a time. So, as more and more people start using this system, and you saw that in adoption number, there's a lot more usage on this thing. They push the envelope gradually, so we need to keep solving these things. But at the same time, we are looking at a few key transformational projects to make Jenkins pipeline a lot more to sort of leapfrog so to speak. So one of the projects that we are looking at is kind of redoing the deep cuts of the pipeline execution system. So not only does it give you the ability like better scalability and better failure isolations, but it also allows us, the contributors to the project, to sort of simplify the maintenance overhead. Right? The code gets a lot simpler. So that's something I know some of the people in the community is actively looking into, and hopefully there'll be more information coming out of that soon. Now, speaking of the foundational system, another thing that kind of makes the pipeline really work well and really shine is Blue Ocean. Right? That's another transformational project that we took on in Jenkins a few years back, starting a few years back, and then it's been hugely successful among the people who's used it. So we kind of want to replicate the success to the next phase, right? We have this initial phase of this project has been incredibly successful. What's the second stage of that rocket that propels that to the even greater success? So to me, if you ask me that, then that's kind of obvious how we do that in Jenkins project, which is the extensibility, right? We allow people in the community to build more interesting stuff on top of the base Blue Ocean so that you, the users, can spend more time with Blue Ocean and spend less time with the classic UI. So that's my call. That's been my call to the team, people who are doing this effort, is that we gotta make Blue Ocean more extensible, open it up for all the great plugin developers to take advantages of that. Another thing I think it's going to be happening, another thing that is actually already happening, and then which is probably why you started hearing less about Blue Ocean, perhaps paradoxically, is that it's time for Blue Ocean to lose a separate identity, right? If you think about like a plugin manager or the update center or like a dashboard, in Jenkins, none of these things have code names, right? It's just an integral part of Jenkins. And I think it's time that the Blue Ocean should just become the user interface for Jenkins. And in each case, we will stop, we don't have to refer to it as a separate thing. It should be more and more integrated into the deep, so like a foundational part of part of Jenkins. And it just becomes the Jenkins UI, no code name. So that's another thing I hope will happen going forward. And I think you might have noticed in the recent version of Jenkins, for example, the login user interface has changed to more like a Blue Ocean theme. So some of these integration work, I think, is kind of already happening. So the next superpower that's also moving Jenkins into the stateless direction is obviously the configurations code. The whole point of, I guess, the key centerpiece of today's. So I'm not going to steal thunders from the Elena and Nicola and others who's been actually working on this effort. But one thing I wanted to mention is this a little bit of a tortured history, I might say, about how this project came into being, right? Because this idea, some of you might think that this idea of managing Jenkins as code is so obvious, right? It's been so obvious even 10 years ago, perhaps. So why did it take so long? Now it turns out that it wasn't a lack of trying. We had a lot of people. One thing that the Jenkins community is good at is because everyone has their own ideas and they can take that ideas to execution on their own. Different people have tried to scratch this itch in so many ways in the past. I can at least think of 3 or 4 different efforts done by people, including me. And then we scratch a little bit of surface, and then they kind of make an interesting proof of concept, if you may. But over the time, what I learned is, again, like I mentioned earlier, if the problem space is bigger than certain size, it's going to be difficult for one person to just kind of push it and make it into something that spans across the entire usage of the Jenkins community. So, so if I recall correctly, about I think 2 years ago, Nicola and I was talking, and I suggested to Nicola that okay, we should look into this space, right? Because I made this initial scratch. I made one scratch. And then I couldn't push it further. It turns out that I have some other day jobs on hacking on this fun project as the company got bigger. But I knew that this is a problem that really needed to solving. So I asked Nicola to look into this, and he started doing that work. And then as he was making progress, we discovered that the folks from Pragma are also working on the same space. And then so we kind of got in touch. We knew each other for the longest time. And then so I thought, like, okay, this is, like, it makes no sense for these, like, smart people to be working independently, solving the same problem from different directions. So it took a while to, like, sort out this, details within the companies to make sure that this collaboration happens smoothly. But in the end, I think we were able to establish this structure in which the key people from those two companies are sort of forming this central critical bandwidth to move this project forward. And then the good thing about this, once the ball started rolling, we started seeing other people pitching in here and there, and then collectively we are making a lot bigger snowball. And then so, fast forward that, I think that's been going on for about a year. I was checking at the email, and I saw my email to Lars last September that, hey, we need to work on this together. And he was like, yes. And then so I'm really happy to be here with so many Pragma folks in here. And then this kind of exemplify the power of the open source community. And then when we kind of join our hands together, that we can sort of make a bigger punch above our weight. And then that's a theme I'm trying to promote in different projects as well. So anyway, so the configurations code, basically you can, in order to solve these what-if scenarios that I mentioned earlier, you can write this Jenkins configuration in a YAML file, and then it comes with, one of the great things about working with practitioners like Pragma is we know what the people really need. So there's a built-in credential support so that you don't have to bake in the secrets into the system. And then this kind of effort has been got to the point of 1.0, so now it's ready for general consumption, and it still keeps evolving rapidly, right? And then now I think the project is hopefully getting to the next phase where we need to involve a larger number of plugin developers, beyond these foundations that we build collectively together. So anyway, more about this from people who are actually doing it. So I'm going to move right on. The next superpower that I wanted to talk about, which is also moving Jenkins into the direction of statelessness, is what I call the cloud-native Jenkins. So in order to explain what this is about, what I want you to think about is, if you're experienced or seasoned Jenkins admin, and you know that your company is increasingly dependent on this infrastructure of automation to get the software delivered, then what often means is you become more of a critical, a bottleneck or critical resources in your entire software development chain. So what if, now that's great, but what if you can, you the Jenkins administrator, can relax and sit back and enjoy the fun over the weekend or every evening because the Jenkins just runs for itself without your supervision all the time, right? You are normal. What if you don't get any more frantic phone calls a Friday evening because some other team somewhere in the world needs to deliver the new bits to the production, but the Jenkins is done and you're the only guy who can help it, right? I'm sure it has happened to many of you here. But the point of the cloud-native Jenkins is to prevent that kind of stressful situations from happening. Another point of the cloud-native Jenkins is this scenario. So often, again, as automation scales up, Jenkins kind of starts small normally, right? Somebody in your team, maybe you yourself, put that into the computer under your desk, I guess. And then you start putting your workload, you talk to your colleague over lunch, and then other people start piling on more workload. And then as the usage grows, you kind of have to keep adjusting the way it's getting deployed, have this agent pool, all that stuff. But what if we don't have to do any of that, right? What if you don't have to do any of the upfront provisioning or the capacity planning or anything? You just deploy the software. And then it's very simple and easy. And then as your workload piles on, it just scales up and up without any major re-architecting of the deployment. And all the way until the global, say, 10,000 engineering company can put the entire workload on this single Jenkins, and it keeps working like that. So that level of the scalability or elasticity, that's not something we have today, right? So we can, and I think we can get there, and then we can let you pay just the cost proportional to the usage, basically by keep sending the money to one of those cloud providers, then I think that would be a great place for us to be in. So that's the kind of place that we are trying to do in the cloud native Jenkins. And then, from the technology perspective, what that means is we're going to remove the single file system as a data storage, because clearly that's not going to be what people do in 2018. And also by removing the single process Jenkins master as a single point of failure. So this is a pretty, big effort, but I'm happy to report that some of the work is well underway. For example, the artifact archiving, the ability to sort of capture the binaries that's produced during the build, today that gets stored into the Jenkins home, but now we have means to store them into S3. So again, that's a kind of, obviously far more scalable, more manageable storage. And similarly, the work, I think the work is well underway to store the build logs, this console output that's coming out from your tools. They can be sent over to AWS CloudWatch. And then that's, I believe, currently available in the preview form. And those features are a good part of these features are already on your Jenkins, although even though you might have not noticed it yet. And as with everything else in the Jenkins community, even though I only talk about this AWS implementation, this is pluggable and all. So we've been in conversation with, for example, folks from Microsoft, and they are very interested in providing different drivers for these comparable services on Azure, and the same is GCP and Google. So pretty soon this work, I think I hope I hope to see this work expand in the coming days and months. And even just with these two efforts, I mean, those are still like a first, just a first step. But just by those two projects combined, they collectively represent like the biggest portion of your Jenkins home data storage, right? So just by like us checking those two boxes, you get to take a big cut in the side of the Jenkins home. So what that translates that in sort of like a non-technology terms is like, okay, you get to reduce the storage cost a whole lot more, and you get a better scalability because the things that you need in this Jenkins home has direct impact in the performance of the backup or disaster recovery or that sort of things. So this is already well underway, but obviously the more will come. So in fact, what I've been making the call is like where we are marching toward is we're going to create this new cloud-native distribution of Jenkins, right? So it's not. This is a Jenkins. Well, the Jenkins that you know today comes in like as a WAR file or the RPM package and so on, right? But the cloud-native distribution of Jenkins is not going to come as a WAR file. Instead, it's a distributed, highly available Jenkins that's designed to run well on the Kubernetes. And then you can imagine pieces like the key build engines that drives, let's say, pipeline execution, run as a serverless manner, not as a thread inside the Jenkins process. So in that kind of scheme, you can already picture that how that will improve the scalability to like a couple of order of magnitude beyond where we can't deliver today, which is already pretty good. And then I hope, and then this will get hopefully delivered in continuous manner, like Evergreen, which is another superpower that I'm not going to talk today because it's not directly related to the stateless Jenkins as far as I'm concerned. But I know the Baptiste is going to talk later about that. So, we're trying to create this like a, different flavor of Jenkins, if you may, that's like more natively like take advantages of the features and all this previous work that built on top of all this previous work, but designed to create a wholly different experience for the users. And then, this is going to be initially focused on a very specific narrow use case. So one of the current design that we are talking among ourselves is it's not going to have any user interface like what you're used to see, just so that we can get there pretty quickly, right? But over time, like we obviously want to bring all these things back that makes Jenkins really useful. And then because of that, the initial version might not be as useful to every use case, but that's okay. We're going to bring you along. And in order to do these things in the Jenkins project, because I mentioned earlier that this collaboration between different people and working together is kind of key to make these big efforts successful. We've studied this thing called the special interest group in the Jenkins community. And then as a part of those, we formed a cloud native SIG. So this is a group of people, like-minded people who wanted to push Jenkins into these directions. And then we have reps from companies like CloudBees or Pacma or the Microsoft and Google and so on. So we are working forward together in this context to make sure that the cloud native Jenkins becomes reality as soon as possible. And then the last, I believe, let me double check. So the last superpower that's pushing Jenkins into the direction of the stateless is the Jenkins X. So let me talk about that a little. So I think, unless you've been hiding under the rock, you must have heard this already too many times, so I'm not going to repeat that too many more. But I think the Kubernetes is kind of like taking this web application development world by storm. When I look at it, I mean, there's a lot to like, right? The fact that it's kind of acting as a common portability platform across different clouds, like AWS and Azure and GCP, and it's got the functionalities that make it really useful, like as a middleware layer of the cloud, like the scheduling and the service discovery and like the load balancer and stuff like that. And then perhaps close to my heart is this idea of extensibility. It's like when I look at the Kubernetes, it's not just the functionality, but the way it's composed together is designed to allow other people to build more functionality on top of it. And then that really reminds me of the similar idea in Jenkins. So it's for Jenkins, obviously, it's a plugin, but that's I know. Well, I kind of fundamentally believe in allowing people from different background and different parts of the world to turn their ideas into a reality software without getting permissions or approvals from the people doing the project. So whenever I see extensibility, that's usually for me it's like a great sign that the project is going to be successful. Anyway, so I saw a lot of. I know that a lot of the application development teams are kind of stepping back and pausing to figure out how to harness this power of the Kubernetes to make them more productive. I know that's a lot that's going on in a lot of places. And as a technologist, I do enjoy that kind of playing with a new toy, so to speak. But at the same time, it's actually a lot of work. Right? Now, just installing Kubernetes and properly operationalizing it is no small feat. Even if you get a Kubernetes cluster properly deployed and operationalized, you still have to figure out what are the right tools and services to integrate to make you productive. And this is a rapidly evolving ecosystem. There are lots of new tools coming, open source projects and commercial solutions coming up every day. And then, obviously you have to move your applications to the containers if you still haven't done that already. But in Kubernetes, that's not sufficient, right? You need to figure out how to get that containers deployed. Are you going to do it through the pod file or through the Helm chart or some other means? And then you have to wire up the entire automation so that the code change here eventually results in the running application over there. And then you have to figure out the best practices of how to do that. So what's your software delivery chain is going to look like in Kubernetes? And then that still needs to be improved and figured out. You might have heard this thing called the GitOps. Is this the time to adopt that or not? Is that too far ahead for your organizations? How do you deal with the secrets? And then even if you figure them all out, you always wonder, how, did I do it right? I put this together. It seems to be working for me, but am I marching toward this dead end that nobody else is marching toward? Or when I was looking at this, did I miss out some other things? Every time you see a new announcement in the Kubernetes community, you have to worry, okay, is this thing going to make some of what I did obsolete? So the way I see it, you can have fun tinkering with these projects and wiring everything up together in the same way that opening the car bonnet could be fun. Or if you're kind of people who just want to get going and be productive, then like my wife, then the Jenkins X, you can just pick up Jenkins X, and then get productive. And because that's really kind of what we are trying to do here is no, let's not open up the bonnet. Let's just turn the key and get going here. Right? So because the vision of the Jenkins X is that we in the Jenkins community, there are people who live and breathe the Kubernetes day in, day out. And then so these people are going to look at, by using their experience and knowledge in the space, they're going to figure out how to best continuously deliver cloud-native applications. And then here I'm talking not about the building testing, but the entire practice of promoting apps between different environments, how do people collaborate, sort of things like that. And then we integrate the best of the breed solutions in the tools, in the space, in this ecosystem to achieve that. And then hide all that wiring and automation behind a pleasant, convenient command line interface, which speaks the high-level language so that your developers don't really need to know anything about these tools in the ecosystem or the Kubernetes-specific jargons. So in order to achieve that, we'll be opinionated about how to do things. So there'll be, we think what the best practice is, and then so that you will just use it. And then by doing all that, I believe we'll be turning Kubernetes to where it's supposed to be, which is basically a means to the end being developing awesome applications a whole lot faster. So the great thing about this, when I say best practices, the great thing about it is, we are not really reinventing, we are not inventing brand new practices that we think is best, right? It turns out that it's really just a assembling of all the practices that our industry has collectively discovered over a decade or so as a good practice. Right? So when you pick up Jenkins X, you kind of feel right at home and old, because none of the concept you see in there is particularly surprisingly new. Right? There's really nothing new you need to learn, but at the same time, it's excitingly new and fresh because all these things that you already know can be used to drive this latest technology that makes it very productive, which is the Kubernetes. So, one way I think about this difference is the Jenkins and Jenkins X, right? We have those things, how they are different. Jenkins, I think of it kind of as a road network, right? Because if you look at the entire space of the software development, there's a lot of different kinds of the software, from video games to mobile app to the embedded software to web application development. So Jenkins got the flexibility. It's like driving a car. So long as you know where you're going, you're in the driver's seat, you can turn at every corner you want, and then you can get to anywhere in the world. Jenkins X, on the other hand, is kind of like a high-speed rail. It only goes to one destination, but it's a major destination that a lot of people want to go to, which in this case is web application development. And all you have to do is just show up on the train station, and you hop in, and then the train will take you to your destination without you, driving anything in no time, with a lot more pleasant experience. So let's see, a quick the tour of some of the superpowers that's happening, some of the awesome projects that's happening in the Jenkins community. And collectively, as you saw, the stateless is still just one angle of it. There are lots of other aspects as well. But because of all the exciting efforts that's happening in Jenkins, I think the Jenkins itself is kind of getting redefined. It's changing the meaning of Jenkins itself, right? I think that too many people think of Jenkins as this core, which is a WAR file, and then a whole bunch of plugins. But it's really no longer that. If you look at the Jenkins X, there's a whole lot more than just this WAR file and the plugins. And if you look at the cloud-native Jenkins, you see the same trend. So I think this is where the Jenkins is going. And then, it's not an easy walk in the park. It's going to be a journey. So it's going to take time. But as you see, some of these projects are already bearing fruits. And as we embark this journey, I think it's critical for us to keep talking, as in the contributors and users to keep talking, because as we arm you with the new superpowers, we need you to take advantage of those things to get yourself equipped better. and then tell us back like what worked, what didn't, like what you wanted more of, what you wanted to do less of. And those will inform the people who are working on this project to take the effort into the right destinations. So on that note, I think my presentation is done, and then I believe we have a bit of time for questions and answers, if there's any.